success stories told by the people who lived them.
We're going to have some guests on this show that everybody knows, and we're going to have guests on this show that nobody knows yet.
One by one, Nick Hyder is adding hits to the hit streak.
Blessings, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Hit Streak. I'm your man, Nick Hyder, and in the Hit Lab with me today, I've got somebody really, really, really special. Not just to me, but to millions. And, dude, like, I am blown away with what this cat has accomplished in a very short time here on this earth. But check it out, folks. He is an ESPN play-by-play sports commentator and the host of the O Show. I have the one and only Jack O'Hara in the building. Bro, what's happening?
Nick Hyder, the Hit Streak podcast in the Hit Lab, Nashville, Tennessee. First time ever for me. It's been an honor, man.
Well, brother, like, so you don't live here. Like, how far did you come to do this?
Oh, what is it, like a 4-hour flight? You've made the flight from Nashville to Phoenix.
That's right.
4 hours long?
That's right, yeah. It's a minute.
It's crazy. My brother obviously has space out here, so I've been kicking it on Broadway Street?
Yeah, Broadway, yeah.
It's crazy downtown. Like, I was telling Jim beforehand, like 11 a.m. on a Friday, people are really dialed in. You know, I'm like, that's where like the 50-year-old in me comes out. I'm 23 years old, but I don't act it. So like when people tell me, they're like, I thought you were like at least 30, you know? And it's like, I'm like, man, I would never want to do this. But I'm very thankful that you've invited me on today. I know we did my show a few months ago when you were in Scottsdale. That was a really fun time. Getting to meet the crowd. Obviously, Rack Financial's kicking off now. You had Cole on. I saw that episode as well. I'm kind of like a nerd in that sense. I try to absorb as much information as possible and meet as many people as possible. So,
well, I mean, like, first of all, the flight, it's about 4 hours. It's 2 movies. That's how I time the flights, right?
I actually had a layover in Houston, and I was in Houston. I got a steak, and then it was like a 50-minute flight from Houston.
Gotcha. Yeah, Houston's an easy one. I feel like you're just jumping over a pond.
Exactly.
Well, man, like, so we were a guest on Rhea and I both. It's always better when Rhee's there. You know what I'm saying?
Husband and wife, you always have that back and forth banter. It always makes it better.
Not everybody loves me. I'm not it for everybody, but everybody loves Rhee. Everybody loves Rhee. But we did your show. It was one of those things where you didn't even know that we were going to be in town until last minute. You were able to put it all together. We had a great time, man.
And that's the best part about being in the podcast space is just getting a random call. Peter Meyerhoff, thank you very much. He's helped me out a lot. Like he hasn't had to, and he goes out of his way to help me out a lot with people and introducing me. So I'm very grateful for Peter. But yeah, I just got a call. He's like, one of my guys, Nick Hyder, is going to be in town. He's looking to do a podcast. Thought about you. I'm like, okay. So like 24 hours notice, I'm like trying to figure out, we have a few different studio spaces that we can work with. I'm like, like an emergency, 24 hours. Can we get it done? And we were able to find a space to get you guys in. And then we went to the cigar bar afterwards, you introduced me to Dane and everybody, which was a really fun time. But that's what I love most about it is literally like those last minute things of like, oh my God, we can interview so-and-so.
Yeah.
And like, let's do it.
Dude, it was cool. It was a lot of fun. And like, folks, you've done over 550 episods of your podcast. Like, I've been doing this for a minute, and we're right at the 60 episode mark, give or take. It's a job, man. 550 episodes is incredible.
It is a job. But you, like I was telling you guys, Connor, Jim, you guys have a well-oiled machine here. Like, it's very easy to shoot stuff when you're shooting it out of here. I remember I started out shooting it out of, we have a basement bar in my home state of New Jersey, is where I originally shot it out of, literally just with my iPhone. So my iPhone has like the voice memo app, and I would just use click voice memo, and then I would use, I think I used my iPad for voice memo, and I used my phone to call the person to interview them. Because back in the day, like, it was just audio. You know? I feel like when COVID happened, that's when everybody really started utilizing Zoom and Skype and everything for video content.
That's right.
But that's how I started. I would do it out of my dorm room. I went to Grand Canyon University in Phoenix. That's how I kind of got out into the Arizona space. And I would just record in like a conference room. The AC would turn on and off over and over again, like 5 times throughout the episode. So the audio was kind of rough. Didn't know how to edit at the time when I started either. I was just a kid like raw audio is really bad. You can go check it out. It's all still out there back like those first 50 to 100 episodes.
Yeah, man.
And then when COVID hit, we were talking about, that's when it all like kind of came together. Zoom was an option. So like you could record via video. It could be more of a vodcast, starting a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And that's when like the big names who wouldn't typically be available became available because they had nothing else to do. It's
That's
like,
right.
if I can't get them now, I'm never going to get them, you know? So I was able to key in. And once you get one or two, people take notice and kind of spirals from there.
So COVID, that was a couple years ago. So you would have been barely 21 years old, right?
Correct.
And so walk me through, I have a 13-year-old son. He's going to listen to this. He's going to get a lot out of this episode, right?
I hope so.
Because ironically, like you're closer to his age than you are to mine.
That's crazy.
I know, right?
Because when you're 13, you're like, I'm a child. And when you're 21, you're like, I'm an adult. Like, you're a completely different person.
That's right.
Like, completely different person.
That's right. Well, man, like, you know, I've had a lot of great conversations, and something that is talked about a lot is that, you know, people are going to school for 13 to 17 or more years, and they're coming out and they're having a hard time applying all the knowledge that they learned in school to a lifestyle, or I mean, just how to, you know, got a marketing degree. That's great. Tell me how you can generate revenue with marketing. And most of them don't know how to do that. So like, I'd just say you're just way more, from a business perspective, way more mature than the average 20 or 21 year old. I mean, that's a young adult is what we'll say. Right. So like, walk me through that. Like, how'd you get there?
I just figured this out too. Like, when it comes to being mature for a young kid, like I was telling you before, just walking on Broadway, some people are just partying it up, and I love it. Like, it's a great atmosphere. A lot of businesses making a lot of money off of that partying. Mm-hmm. It was never my scene. I was always the kid at home just watching Yankee games growing up, knowing exactly what I wanted to do, you know? Watching Michael Kay on the Yes Network, I was like, I want to do that. He gets paid to call New York Yankee games and baseball games.
That's right.
So I knew at the age of 5 what I wanted to do growing up. And I think it's because all of my idols growing up, whether it be Michael Kay calling baseball games, Chris Jericho, professional wrestler, huge inspiration of mine of how creative he is in a ton of different spaces. I'm a huge rock and roll guy.
That's cool.
So is he. Dave Grohl, the Foo Fighters,
Absolutely.
the way he carries himself above anything else. I'm not a musician. My brother's a huge musician, but just the way that guy carries himself for being like the face of rock and roll, just a down-to-earth guy, I'm inspired by that, and that's who I want to come off as, someone who's, you know, as genuine as hell, and at the same time considered one of the more giving and nicer people in the industry that you work with. Because the more people you work with that are like that, the happier everybody is going to be involved, right? Not only just spiritually, but financially, professionally, all the above. So all of my idols, when I was 17 years old, were in their 40s and 50s. So I carried myself as a 40 or 50 year old. And it just clicked with me like a couple weeks ago. I'm like, that's why I act so old and people think I'm older. Because all of my idols that I look up to and I try to, you know, duplicate myself after are all in their 40s and 50s. So I think that's why I'm mature. And I've always been intrigued by that space. So I don't think it was necessarily like, oh, I just like didn't like fit in a way. It was more so like I was just always drawn to that crowd. That's
a very interesting perspective, and it's you know, like you mentioned, Dave Grohl. That guy went from being the drummer of a band that all real musicians made fun of because grunge wasn't really respected because everything was so simple, to now he is like he's playing with the greatest of the greats, sharing the stage with them on whether it's guitar, singing, or drums or whatever. Like, he's incredible. He absolutely is incredible, and what they've been able to do, how they've transitioned so many times. Even losing their drummer this year and everything else, like, but there's you still see him. He's on stages. He's still doing stuff. It's cool, man. It's crazy. I actually you mentioned, you know, Taylor Hawkins, rest in peace. I got a chance to meet him too a little bit earlier this year. So this is the main thing that I love about my job and what I do is that at the end of the day, like, someone asked me on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, like, who is Jack O'Hara? And I'm like, oh wow, like that's a pretty deep question. Simply deep. It's like, I'm a storyteller. You know, I'm a storyteller who really doesn't, you know, give two Fs about what anybody else thinks. I'm going to do it my way. That's important to me too. Because even like on ESPN, like, I wouldn't necessarily say I fall in line. Like, obviously there's certain things you got to regulate, but like I have my own style of what I want my
voice to sound like, as opposed to mimicking someone else or being like, I want to be the next Bob Costas. Like, why would you want to be the next Bob Costas when you could be the first Jack O'Hara or the first Nick Hyder, you know? So that was very important to me. And then being a storyteller, I'll get to that story. Foo Fighters were headlining an event. This was probably the second to last show they did before he passed.
Wow.
In Tempe, Arizona. It's called the Innings Festival.
Okay.
And it's hosted by Major League Baseball. So Major League former players come in, you know, and that's where I get my credential. I interview everybody. And I got a chance to meet Chris Shiflett and Rami Jaffe from the Foo Fighters backstage. And they're just like, oh, you want a t-shirt, man? T-shirt Taylor. And Taylor was like giving away all these t-shirts. So he's like, yeah, absolutely, man. Threw me a t-shirt. I'm like, oh, thanks so much, man. Big fan. And then I rushed back because I only had a few minutes to really get to talk to people in catering. And I throw on the shirt immediately, and it's like up to here on me, like a tank top. I'm like, it's a woman's large. Like, what am I going to do? So the girl that came with me that night, I just gave it to her. And then 2 weeks later, he was gone. And I'm like, wow. I call that girl like at least a couple times a month, like, you still have the shirt? It was like, Taylor Hawkins gave me that shirt. I just want to make sure, you know, like you're taking good care of it and it just doesn't get lost or something. It's
so cool. We mentioned on your show that the Foo Fighters are my son's. He's a big musician, and they're by far his favorite. And Lance Wascom, one of the co-founders of AVLX, the company that built this studio, and a previous guest and a great man and a great friend, through their business, he has a lot of connections. And not long before, I mean, literally just a few months before all that went down, he made a call, and they sent him like the set list, everybody's picks from the concert, and some used sticks from Taylor, which he has, and they're all framed up and put up, and oh man! And then of course all that happened later, and you know, talk to you about, you know, how big of an impact a band like that has. There's certain parts of your life where like, I will never forget where I was standing when I heard about 9/11 for the first time. Yeah. You know, I will never forget where I was in my car when I read on Instagram from the Foo Fighters that Taylor had passed for the first time. I'll never forget that. I
was the same way, because you talk about like huge deaths like that when it comes to people that actually inspire you. Like, your son's probably the same way. I'm not a musician, but I'm such a big fan. The thought of Taylor Hawkins just ripping it on a drum kit probably enters my mind like a dozen times a day, just thinking thoughts, you know? So like when that happened, I immediately was just like, is it real? Yeah. You know, like texted my dad, my brother. My brother was just like, Taylor fucking Hawkins.
That's
like,
right.
Are you sure? Are you sure this isn't BS?
Yeah.
And we're like, no, it's like, holy crap. Like, this is our favorite band. And they were the one band for 25 years that like, they didn't have a death in the band. Like, there was no drama ever.
That's right.
This was like the first time where it was like, oh my God. Like, even when Kobe Bryant died, I'm not a huge NBA guy, but like, it was huge news.
Yeah.
But I don't remember.
I remember where I was standing when I found that out.
Yeah, I was in my college dorm room. I'm like, TMZ broke it, so like, can we really trust it? But like, the last time I thought of Kobe Bryant before that was probably like when he retired 4 years prior. You know, like Taylor Hawkins was someone I still think about like all the time. I'm like, oh my God.
That's right.
Like, he's gone. He's really gone.
That's right. They were. They just always, like, most of the time when you're in your 40s or 50s, you're on the way out in the music scene, and it was like they were just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And in their movie that they had just put out, like literally like a couple weeks or a month before he passed, I took my son to see that. Don't Judge Me, Parents. He loved it, and he's watched it multiple times since then. It was hysterical. I love that movie. For
a band who has no acting ability at all, it was hilarious.
Well, all their music videos were the best anyways, right?
Oh my God. Grohl is just on another level. And the fact that the other five kind of kept up with him all these years too, because like, I think that's like the running joke. Even in the movie, you see them just like, oh, we want to get out of here. Like, like, he's just crazy.
Well, man, so talk to me a little bit about how, first of all, let's just stay on the podcast for a minute, because like some of your guests include Magic Johnson, Grant Cardone, Jordan Belfort, Dave Matthews, Bob Saget, Cheech Chong, Carol Baskin. The list goes on and on and on. And I can tell you, I've had some amazing folks on here, but like, when you get the bigger the name people, they're busy, dude. They're all over the world. They're traveling. So like, here you are, not even a 25-year-old man, and you're getting the biggest names on the planet. How in the world?
Well, it all started again with COVID. Getting Jordan Belfort on, he was easy. I attended a webinar, which was supposed to be a seminar in Atlantic City, New Jersey, that I wanted to go to. And then COVID hit, so he turned it into a webinar. And everybody kind of got a chance to ask him a question. I was just like, hey, I do this podcast. We're like 200 episodes deep. He's like, yeah, absolutely, because why not? And, if you go back and listen, I probably asked like 2 or 3 questions, and he kind of just told his entire life story for about an hour, which was fine by me because it's all great stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Even looking back at it now, like getting into the sales game, I'm just like, oh, this is insanely valuable. Where like at the time, I'm just a journalist with a journalism degree, just trying to get an interview with a big name.
Okay.
And then we were able to get a few other big names. We had Chad Michael Murray, who's a big actor, Drake Bell, Josh Peck from that Nickelodeon show back in the day.
Josh Peck is hysterical.
He is very funny. Has been able to evolve as well over the years. Bob Saget was during COVID as well.
Gotcha.
Insanely nice person.
Yeah.
It's like Rob Schneider.
Oh, wow.
Was awesome. As soon as I hopped on the Zoom call, like that one I was kind of nervous for him. Like, I've watched his movies since I was like 5. He's just like, Jack, handsome man, what's going on? I'm just like, oh, I'm relaxed. This guy's awesome. Because you never really know. Like with big names, you always hear like never meet your heroes.
Yeah.
And it's like, I haven't had one of those experiences yet. Thank goodness. Everybody's been so kind to me in this industry. And even getting a degree in journalism and media from Grand Canyon University, like, everybody's looking to help each other out. It's up to you. Like, you really want it at the end of the day. Because people are going to help you if you want to get better, And we've seen it throughout, my time doing this the last 6-7 years. People, who wants it and who doesn't. Because the people that want it are still here. The people that don't kind of fizzled out and are doing whatever the hell they're doing.
Amen to that. Well, so first of all, getting those names is a huge accomplishment in its own. But when you get those names, you get their fans who have opinions and all those things. So, one of the craziest things that I learned when we started doing this and it really started to take off was not just the good responses that you get, but the amount of negative. Everybody's just got an opinion, and that's totally cool. And you know what? I've learned a lot. I read, we study it. We take everything. It's a suggestion, man. Somebody volunteered their time and their opinion. Whether it holds water or not, we get to decide that. But we can always learn, and we're always looking to get better. When we're done today, I'll ask you, how'd I do? What can I do better? Right? So how did you I'm old enough now. Life's beat me up and spit me out, chewed me up, spit me out multiple times. I don't know. I remember the first time as a player when I wasn't much older than you. My very first professional game, my second professional game. It was our first one on the road. It was my first start. Everybody knows that's on the home team. We were in. Where were we? We were in Gateway Stadium in St. Louis. Well, guess who they picked to be the strikeout? If I strike out, everybody gets free beer. Right. So, man, you should have heard. I heard everything they said from the stands that day. Yeah. And it messed with me. It really did. It got under my skin a little bit. I hadn't learned how to use that, block it out, and use it to my advantage. You probably had some crazy things said to you, yet you persevered through. Like, you wouldn't believe how much people care about what other people think.
Oh my God. Losers, in my opinion. I don't know if that's too harsh, but legitimately, like I said before, I don't really give 2 F's about what anybody thinks. I'm going to do whatever. Yeah. I know I have my quirks, I have my things that are my strengths, my weaknesses, but this is what I want to do, and I'm going head first. What's the worst? That's my life motto. What's the worst that could happen?
I like that.
What is the absolute worst that could happen? Is that you fail, you learn from it. Someone didn't like you. I actually had a guy a few years ago who I guess listened to me at the time, just call me out on the street. I was in San Diego for the MLB winter meetings, which is actually where I'm going immediately after this trip to Nashville. And a guy just pointed me out on the street. He's like, oh, don't listen to him. He has no idea what he's talking about. It was like, that's Jack O'Hara from the O Show. I'm like, first of all, I'm kind of flattered that I actually had someone. I'm like, oh, I have no idea who you are.
That's right.
You're not my mom or dad, and you're listening to my show. So thank you. But yeah, in the moment, I'm like, oh, I guess whatever. But I knew at the time I was 20 years old. I was still in college, still learning it. It was still technically a resume builder project that I was doing.
Gotcha. It
wasn't until I graduated when I had 2 businesses come to me looking for sponsorships. So we'll give you X amount of money to just put our stuff in your studio. And I'm just like, oh, this is a business.
That's right.
And that's when it kind of changed not changed, but I kind of that switch came on. Like now it's about creating revenue, bringing on people, making this bigger than it actually is. But yeah, I mean, all the time. Honestly, in today's world, I don't get too much of it unless it's like on YouTube, which I don't really care. Those people don't even show their faces on their accounts.
Yeah.
I honestly like have a chip on my shoulder when people not necessarily like introduce me in a way, but like, oh, this is Jack. He's a young up and comer, stuff like that. Where it's like, I get it. I'm 23 years old, but it's like, I've been doing this a long time and I feel like I can go just with the best of them.
Absolutely.
Whether it be on ESPN, when I'm doing play-by-play with like a 60-year-old color guy who's just like, oh yeah, this is, young kid. He's still learning the ropes. It's like, I guess I'll look back at it and think like, yeah, maybe they were right. But I feel like I'm the best at what I do right now, and sometimes like I have that chip on my shoulder when people are just like, hey man, like up and comer, he's got this little show, go on his show, and I'm just like, we'll see. In a few years you'll be like, oh yeah,
dude, it was we were ecstatic to come on. It was a big deal. I mean, we were super proud to do it, and like I say, it was a big deal. It's still a big deal, and it's something that we're proud to say that we did. It's something that, like, we promote that episode a lot on a lot of our stuff. It's cool, man.
I appreciate it. It's funny. This week, I always told my brother when I first started the O Show, because anybody who listens, they notice like the O is very familiar. It's the Baltimore Orioles O. Mm-hmm. And I always told him, like, when we first started, I'm like, we'll know we made it when someone from that franchise comes after us for copyright.
That's exactly how you think.
This past Wednesday, I got an email from the Baltimore Orioles PR saying, that's our logo. Can you kind of like alter it or else you're going to get fined?
Are you serious?
And I immediately texted my brother. I'm like, what did I tell you like 5-6 years ago? He's like, oh, when the Baltimore Orioles call you. I'm like, yep. I sent him the screenshot of the email. I'm like, we made it. I mean, not necessarily made it, but like we're getting there.
Absolutely. So, like, you're going to make some tweaks to it. I guess they'll decide if you made enough tweaks or not. Like, how does that work?
I guess I got to send them something. I kind of rebranded our YouTube channel to Jack O'Hara TV because I always figured it was easier. When people introduce, they're like, this is Jack from like the O'Hara Show or the Jack O'Hara. So I'm like, honestly, like it's probably easier just to say like, Jack O'Hara TV. It's easy. That way I could brand not only my podcast, but any other videos I want to make, maybe just put broadcast reels. I want to get into the film space, direct some stuff, direct documentaries. So like once it all comes together, it's just the Jack O'Hara brand.
That's right. That
way nobody finds me for using their logo.
That's right. And kudos to the Baltimore Orioles for, recognizing it and then reaching out like they did instead of being, they could have been jerks about it. You know what I mean?
They could wiped all my stuff.
They could totally gone a different route over that. So that's pretty cool.
Steinbrenner would have done that.
Absolutely. And as another Yankee fan myself, good job Baltimore, but that's all you get. That's all I can say.
Yeah, focus on winning some baseball games.
That's right. Let's go. So, talk to me about how you got involved with ESPN. That's a pretty big, like you went straight for the big time and got it.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, like I said, since I was 5, I wanted to be a play-by-play sports commentator. So when I got to college, I honestly should have started earlier looking back at it. I'm like, I could have been the one and only commentator in high school because we didn't really have like a broadcast network or system. I wish I kind of went out of my way. I could have done it literally from my laptop. But you live and you learn. When I started in college, all 4 years, had multiple internships, wanted to travel the country too. I had play-by-play commentating internships in Los Angeles, got to live in LA, a kid from the East Coast. I was in awe of that. Mm-hmm. Got to live down in Charlotte, North Carolina for a summer, doing play-by-play in the minor leagues. And then at GCU, we have honestly the best broadcast department, I think, in any other organization or I guess school I've ever seen for students. Obviously the bigger schools, they bring in Fox, they bring in ESPN to call their games. Yeah. But for a student-run program, the amount of equipment that we were able to use, and that's when ESPN Plus came. ESPN's like, they have a legitimate setup. We want to partner with them and affiliate. So when I was a sophomore, ESPN Plus was our main affiliator. So we all had to sign contracts with ESPN through college. So now we're saying like, oh, Jack O'Hara here on ESPN, which was like an honor at like 20 years old.
Absolutely.
And by the time I graduated, they already knew me. I was arguably, not to pat myself on the back, probably one of the better play-by-play voices in the student program at the time. Mm-hmm. Immediately talked to the ESPN talent producers who bring in talent. I'm like, I'm ready to go. Like whether it be for GCU, maybe ASU games, put me in tennis matches, volleyball, soccer, like whatever you got to do. Because obviously baseball and football, those are the big times. Those are the babies that they don't want to take the risk on. I'm like, give me the smaller games. So I got to sign a freelance contract with them, and now I'm basically just like on call whenever they need me. So it's like doing softball games are fun because it's just like baseball.
Yep.
You know, plus and minus a few different name changes, which I always get in trouble for. That's the other thing. Like I feel like I said, I have my own voice in this. I use some of my inspirations to put out my own voice as a broadcaster, and sometimes you get in trouble. Like I was telling someone the other day, instead of sacrifice bunt, I accidentally, just because I had a blunder, said sacrifice blunt on the air, which honestly wasn't a huge deal. Unfortunately, it was April 20th, and I recognized that right away, so I immediately just elaborated on the fact that I made that mistake, and I'm like, well, it's just 420, and that's all I was thinking about. And my producer's like, you shouldn't have said that. And I got written up. You get like a 3-strike policy, and I think throughout my 4 years in college, I had 5 or 6 strikes. Never got to 3 in one semester, but I always just like, because I always kind of like pushed the needle. I'm like, we should do this, we should do that, and they were always like, that's a little too much. But I always enjoyed doing it.
That's usually how you know how it was too much is when you get there.
Oh yeah, I said accidentally shot cock instead of shot clock in a basketball game. It was my first ever broadcast freshman year too. It was the first thing that ever came out of my mouth.
Oh my!
So I was a color commentator, and there was a layup at the shot clock. I was just like, yeah, at the shot cock, and immediately they call them cough buttons to kind of mute you. They're just like, what did you just say? And they were all just like sarcastically clapping in the back when we got back, like. Nice job, kid.
Reminds me of that the commentators Jason Bateman in in Dodgeball with all this funny stuff they would do.
Ocho, was it the Ocho?
ESPN the Ocho. That's right. Well, the one of the so I had a question for you that you don't know I'm going to ask. But being a baseball fan, what are your top 3 baseball movies that you love to watch that you go back to over and over again?
Ooh, I like The Natural.
Okay.
I don't think it's realistic, but I love the story. I think that was the first one I ever watched as a kid as well.
Okay.
Off-color one, Benchwarmers, with Rob Schneider, David Spade, John Heater. I really like that one. They must put steroids in macaroni. I love that line. Bull Durham.
Yeah.
Probably one of my favorites as well. The one that I don't like, just because I am like a film buff and I like continuity. It wasn't The Field of Dreams, which is another great one. For the Love of the Game with Kevin Costner, where he throws the perfect game. There were just so many things that you'd notice. Like at the end of the game, he threw the perfect game, and the batter was like number 13, and he was a righty. But as he was walking back to the dugout with his head down, he was like number 74 with like a left-hander's batter's helmet on, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense at all. And I picked that up as like a 6-year-old kid. I'm like, Dad, what was it? He's like, I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
You know, but good story as well.
Yeah.
But as a film buff, I'd say my top 3: Field of Dreams, Benchwarmers. I'll go Bull Durham too as those 3.
Absolutely. Where do the major league ones pop up there for you?
I was listening to Wild Thing on the way over here. That's funny. I love that song. I love the first Major League.
Yeah.
The first Major League's really good. The second one, it was just very different.
So the guy that played Parkman in the second one is David Keith. He's he might still live here. It's been a while since I'd seen him, but he was a super cool dude, man, and he played such a jerk in that.
I know.
And but we just loved it.
As an actor, you probably love that role too. Like I always say, like if I was a pro wrestler, if I was an actor, like you want to be the heel, you want to be the bad guy. It's like right. you can literally just like unleash.
That's right.
And there's no like nobody's gonna be like, what the hell, man?
That's right.
Like you can literally just be the worst version of yourself. And
that's right. Well, what's the besides any cool stories about some of the awesome guests you had that stand out? Maybe people that we don't know. That some things that stand out.
Love a lot of the conversations that I've had. I'll tell you the Dave Matthews one.
Okay.
Just because my family is diehard Dave Matthews Band fans. He has like a cult following. It's like them, Fish,
biggest cult ever.
Grateful Dead, I think, is pretty big in that cult as well. Got the chance to interview him at the same festival, actually, Innings Festival in Tempe, Arizona, hosted by Major League Baseball 2 years prior. So this was right before COVID hit, like 2 weeks before COVID hit. And I got the chance to interview, it was Dave Matthews from Dave Matthews Band, it was Rivers Cuomo from Weezer, and it was Ben Gibbard from Death Cab for Cutie.
Holy cow.
So 2 of those guys, Ben Gibbard, great guy. Rivers Cuomo, great guy. just wire, like Harvard guy. Just you could just tell I'm way smarter than I'll ever be. But then Dave Matthews, who's the headliner, came along, and at this point, Rivers Cuomo and Ben Gibbard were so nice. I didn't even know we weren't allowed to record audio with our phone, and I don't know why. Because I was there as an affiliate of like a news website, so I was just there to write articles about the interviews. So everything had to be handwritten.
Gotcha.
So by the time, but those guys didn't tell me. They didn't care. Right. By the time I got to Dave Matthews, though, I was the only guy kind of just like holding my phone up, asked him a question, kind of put it in his face. He immediately just swiped it out of my face, and the phone goes flying on the concrete and just shatters everywhere.
No.
I'm just like, oh my God. So I thought I can't pick up my phone. I'm just gonna be a professional and just ask the questions I want to ask. So I got to ask him like 2 or 3 questions, and then he's just like, all right, that's enough. I got to go. Just like really wasn't like, I mean, at that point you're headlining a show with like 30,000 people. It's like, whatever, like you probably have a lot on your mind and you're going 100% for like days on end. But yeah, I still have the phone completely shattered. Like it almost gives me paper cuts every time I like pick it up, but I still have it because the day I interview him again, and I will interview him again, at very least that'll be a funny story I could
absolutely
show, like back in his face. But that was honestly like the worst experience I had, you could say, but it's still a fun story to tell because my family loves Dave Matthews, and I called my brother after and he was just like, well, did you piss him off? Like, what did you do? What did you do to Dave? Like, nobody really cared. Another one, great interview I did. He's a professional wrestler. I actually saw his face on a billboard. His name's Nick Aldis with the NWA. It's a pro wrestling promotion. It was bought out by Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins. And I got the chance to interview him in college, and he was a big deal at the time. He was like the NWA world champion, and he's like, absolutely, kid. Like, you seem like you're really driven at this, whatever. And it was a great interview. And then afterwards, and I learned to never do this again without anybody's permission. I made a piece of content, whether it was like a reel or something at the time, kind of like, because I asked him, like, if you could cross over to like WWE, who would you wrestle? And he was like, Randy Orton, whoever he said. And I kind of like put those faces together on like a content thing and like put it out.
Oh, wow.
And he did not like it. Basically, like, it was clickbait, like started a rumor mill on like websites and like WWE rumors. They're like, oh, is Nick Aldis coming to WWE? Which was not the case at all. And he's like, I thought you were a professional. Like, this is really like Bush League of you to do. And again, I'm 19. I was like a freshman in college. I was just like, I'm so sorry, Nick, had no idea, whatever. And he's just like, yeah, whatever. So I learned not to do that again. I'd say that was probably the most stinging feel, knowing that like, oh, like I came off as a professional in the interview, but like he doesn't look at me that way anymore. So that's when I'm like, all right, I'm 19. I could learn from that. Other than that, I'm trying to think. Tommy Chong had the best stories ever.
Okay.
Some of the best, like he was telling me how he like was doing blow with Jimi Hendrix 3 days before he had a heart attack and died.
Wow. I'm
just like, no one else has that story.
That's right.
He was telling me how he saw Muhammad Ali cheat on his first wife. I guess he was there at a party or something. And then they called Muhammad Ali out on it. And like he's like, I don't know why I did that, because he gave me like a death stare.
Yeah.
But he had all of these insane stories as he's just like eating edibles the entire time and just like doing his thing. He's honestly the nicest guy in the world. He sent me a box of his CBD gummies for 6 months to my house after that show.
Wow.
For 6 months. And I lived with 4 devoted Christians who look at weed as like, that's drugs.
Right.
Keep that in your. So I had like boxes in my trunk, just like hoping I don't get pulled over or something. I'm just like, why do you have like 50 pounds of CBD gummies in the back of your car?
And nobody's going to believe that Chong gave it to you.
It's like Tommy Chong. Like, sure, kid, sure. See, another thing, it's like, oh, you're like, what, 21 years old? Yeah, no shot. But he's like 85 years old too. He doesn't have to be doing interviews, and he still loves it.
That's awesome.
Like, absolutely. I'm like, yeah. Because I was talking about interviewing Jordan Belfort. He's like, yeah, he was my cellmate when we were in prison together.
What?
I was just like, really? So Jordan Belfort, the first book he wrote, The Way of the Wolf, which is a great book on sales, Tommy Chong looked it over the first time and was just like, this sucks. And kind of like set off Jordan Belfort's like ego in that sense of just like, who the hell are you to tell me? And you just like...
Yeah.
And I guess it lit a fire under him, and he came back with like a second copy, and Tommy Chong was just like, yeah, it was a good book. Like, it was good the first time, but I want to see like if he can get better the second time. It's weird how they paired those two together, though. Someone who's just like, I feel like Jordan Belfort's just like on Adderall in his mind all the time. He's like coming up with things to say, where Tommy Chong's just like, hey, man, just like laid back, like, don't worry about it.
Yeah. You have been exposed to some brilliant minds, and like you mentioned, that's a very interesting thing. Talk about how a guy like Jordan is very, very. It's always moving. It's always fast. He's always. I say guys like him live in the future. They don't live in the present because they don't have time to. They're always thinking about what's next, right? So that's something that my wife says I'm guilty of a lot, and she's always telling me to live in the present some more. Who else? I believe that when you get to a certain level of success, no matter what it is that you do, there's certain core things that everybody has in common. And just like, what makes a house is what makes it a house. The same as everything, but they come in all shapes and sizes and locations, right? So there's like within business, we study that. No matter what industry they're in or what product they sell or whatever, there's certain things that all great businesses have in common. As a matter of fact, there's 8 core principles that Marcus Whitney gave me a while back, and I've studied the hell out of them, and sure enough, that's what they are. What do you see, what are some of like two polar opposites like that, but they have something in common because they became, maybe it's just gel. Maybe that's all they had in common. I don't know. But like, what do you see when you interview, Magic Johnson and Bob Saget? I was probably, that one hurts a lot. Yeah. And that guy was incredible. Yeah. What do you see?
I think, and I believe, I want to say I have these qualities, maybe not, maybe so. You're just aware. Like, you just have the ability to pick up on conversations, people's vibes, people's just the atmosphere around you, in the sense of knowing that, okay, I'm here for a reason, and it's not just to like be everybody's best friend. Like, you want to be able to provide value for people. I think Chong and Belfort got along because they both come from that, not the entertainment world. Jordan Belfort now more so, just because of his personality as well as his experiences that the world saw through the movie that Scorsese put together. But they both come from the world of business. Tommy Chong, as an actor, as a comedian, that is business. You don't go up there on stage. You don't go on set. You don't do what you do. Even a podcast, you don't do it unless you can monetize it. You can get something out of it. I came late into the game with that as well, just because I was a kid and I wanted to do it. I wanted to have my own talk show. And once I was offered something, that's when it kind of switched for me. But everybody kind of has that mindset of like, I want to be known well after I'm gone. I want to be able to create a legacy for myself, not only for myself, but to know that everybody looks at you like he was one of the best, one of the nicest guys, one of the more respected guys, and his teachings still live on today. I feel like everybody, you probably have that knack as well.
Absolutely.
Everybody wants to create that thing that makes them live forever, in a sense. Use a quote from The Natural,
Absolutely.
Like, I want to be able to look back at my life and say, not only did I create a legacy for myself, I created a legacy for my future children, future wife, for the O'Hara name in general. That's important to me. That's really important to me.
Well, everybody we've mentioned didn't have short-term success. It was long-term success. It was spanned out over years and decades or longer. And what I heard when you were just describing those guys is they were just all, everybody's authentic. They're very authentic to themselves.
Yes. It's it's so much easier to be yourself as opposed to being someone else. And some people fall in, that line of being fake when they don't even realize it. Because when you're a kid, you're in high school, you're in middle school, you just want to you want to have friends, you want to feel accepted.
That's right.
So you just do whatever the clique's doing. I'm guilty of it too.
Yeah.
Until you realize you just feel awful, your energy's drained, and you get to a point where it's like, this is how I want to live my life, and I really don't give a rat's ass as to what anybody thinks.
The clique needs to do what you're doing.
Exactly.
That's right.
Like, when you are the black sheep, that's when everybody recognizes what you're doing, and they actually take a look, and you're like, oh shit, like, Jack's got it going on, Nick's got it going on, Connor's got it going on with all of his media stuff, right?
Yeah. You want to stand out.
Yeah, and it's harder, some people see that and they're just like, you don't know what you're doing. And when you're starting out, you don't know what you're doing. When you first started this show, you probably look back at it and be like, man, that's awful. I still look back at my episodes even from a year or two ago. I'm like, man, those were bad questions. I was not listening to my guest. But you learned. You're not going to be a natural overnight,
That's right.
Nobody was a natural overnight.
We watch the first, as a matter of fact, when I first, Brad Lee was one of the first people that I asked about starting a podcast, and he was like, you know how I did my first episode? And I was like, no, how? He goes, I walked out in the office, and first person I saw, I was like, come here, and sat him down, and that's what he did. So Dale was nice enough for me. I was like, all right, dude, we're about to shoot an episode. Have a seat. Yeah. and we shot our first episode. When we go back and watch them now, it's like watching the first episode or first season of Friends versus like season 5 when they really found their characters. Exactly. And they really came into.
But at least you're interviewing someone you've known your entire life. That's right. It's like you can have a good conversation. I remember my first interview was with he's Mark Zumoff. He's the play-by-play voice of the Philadelphia 76ers. That was like my first like non like brother or dad or friend that I had on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And it was like an episode. You ever watch SNL back in the day? It was like the Chris Farley show where he's just like awkward. He's like, so you remember when they won that game and you made that call? Just like, yeah. I'm like, that was cool, right? It was honestly like that awkward. Like I had no idea because I was a total introvert growing up. I had no social skills at all, gotcha. Which is why, like, growing up, I was just so fascinated. I'm like, I can just talk about baseball because I know that. Like, that's fun. And then once you get older, things get easier. Once you become the authentic version of yourself, people tend to gravitate towards that more. The people you want to gravitate towards, not just anybody, right?
Absolutely. Well, obviously we believe here that podcasts are extremely important, and
everybody should have one. Yeah,
everybody should have one. As a matter of fact, somebody commented on one of my things today. It says just another rich guy with a podcast or whatever. And I'm like, well, what's the difference in every guitar player that sits on the corner of Broadway or every kid that picks up and wants to learn how to play a set of drums or something like that, man? Like, what's the difference? Mm-hmm. If you want to do it and if you want to write songs, you start putting stuff out and getting it out there, and you never know what's going to hit.
Yeah. And we talked about this when you were in Scottsdale too. There's a difference between having a podcast and having a show. Like, this is a show, right? Where like you said, anybody could have a podcast. That's the worst thing about podcasting. The best thing about podcasting is that anybody could have a podcast. The worst thing about podcasting is that anybody could have a podcast.
That's right.
However, the ones that are shows stuck at it.
Yeah.
Through the times where it's like, this is not just like something I want to monetize. I feel like a lot of people get into podcasting because they're like, oh, it could be a source of revenue for me. And when they realize that they're getting 12 views on a video, they're just like, what? Like, why isn't anybody listening? Like, this is a waste of my time. Click, and they're done. Where like me growing up, I wasn't even focused on the views. I knew it was like my parents, maybe my sister tuning in for a few years there.
Yeah.
And then once like bigger guests came on, people took notice, and then we went to video. We were able to record out of an awesome studio in Scottsdale for a little bit, bouncing around. We just reached a new deal with the Blue Wire network out at the Wynn in Las Vegas. Gonna be shooting out of their studio. I got to show you that place as well.
Heck yeah.
Insanely nice studio. Probably the nicest podcast studio in the country.
Wow.
In my opinion, from what I've seen. No offense to this place. This place rocks, by the way.
Hey, man, it always there's always a bigger fish, and it always gives us something to shoot for.
No, this is a homey field. I was listening to the episode you did with your wife, obviously, a few weeks back, and she was even saying, like, this is a homey feel, you know? And it really is. Like, this is really nice, well-oiled machine, like I said.
Thank you.
Yeah. What was the question, by the way?
I don't even remember. We were rocking and rolling.
Just like... everybody could have a podcast at the end of the day.
That's right.
And it's like the biggest curse. Like if you're able to do it, like I got into this to have stories.
Yes.
I grew up on Dave Grohl. I grew up on Chris Jericho. I grew up watching WWE, Vince McMahon's promotion, which is storytelling at its finest, long term, short term. I remember a funny story, which I think is really cool. I from the beginning of time, like I said, I wanted to be a broadcaster. So I always wrote articles of every sporting event, every concert, everything I ever went to.
Wow.
Still do to this day.
That's cool.
It's like over like 500 pages of just sporting events. And
That's awesome.
I'd keep the ticket stub, the channel the game was on, the date, the pitching matchup, all of that. And there was one Yankee Red Sox game I went to at Fenway Park. This was 2012, so 10 years ago. Whatever happened in the game happened. But the right fielder at the time, his name was Darnell McDonald. So Darnell McDonald collided with Curtis Granderson on a fly ball for an error or whatever. So I wrote about it. I'm like, Darnell McDonald, dropped the ball, 2 runs scored, Red Sox took a 2-1 lead in the 7th or whatever. So I want to say 7-8 years later, 2018, 2019, I got the chance to interview Darnell, which is really cool. Really cool guy. Maintained that relationship. Another thing about podcasting, as you know, relationships are everything. Right. So it's like the more people you interview and the more reason you give them a reason to provide value, providing clips on social media, getting their face on camera, which everybody loves. That's kind of a plus.
Yep.
3 years later, earlier this year, I launched a podcast with Darnell McDonald, a baseball podcast. Got to have a ton of great people in Major League Baseball on that he's friends with, just talking baseball, which is what I love. It promoted what he's doing with some of his businesses that he has. But I remember thinking back, and I'm like, because I was FaceTiming my dad, I'm like, can you go pull up that scrapbook that I had back in the day and see if I wrote about Darnell McDonald? And he's just flipping through the pages. He's like, July 12th, 2012. Yep, Darnell McDonald drops a fly ball in right field. And I'm like, I get to tell DMAC that because now we're doing a podcast together.
How cool
12 years ago when I was 11, 12 years old,
man,
I wrote about him in a scrapbook. So like little things like that I really love. And that's really what gets me going.
Absolutely.
About this stuff. Because it's stories like that where you get to look back. Even Dave Matthews, hopefully that comes full circle and I get to share with him. And he's just like, oh, sorry, man. Or maybe he's just like, yeah, that's what I do. He puts it in my face. Another guy, I told you this as well. I go to Longhorn Steakhouse like twice a week. I love steak.
Yep.
You know, it's kind of like my big carb day. And there was one day, as a regular there, I don't have to wait. I don't have to do anything. I'm at a point where I don't have to pay, which is like talk about building relationships, you know. And it took me like 4 or 5 years to get to that point, but consistency.
That's right.
Consistency, man. Same with the podcast, 550 plus episodes. The amount of people that you connect with over these years, and they introduce you to other people that you never knew in your wildest dreams that you'd be able to meet or talk to. There was one day Post Malone was in town for this Gold Festival, and he loves food. He's a huge foodie. Was at Longhorn Steakhouse.
Really?
He was at Longhorn. It's crazy. And he was they were making him like wait for a table. I don't know if they were waiting for him or he was waiting for a table. And I pulled up. I always used to Uber there because I didn't have a car at the time in college. I would just Uber on a Saturday night to Longhorn Steakhouse. And I pull up. There's like 3 of those like black Chevy Tahoe vans, security guards everywhere, a bunch of screaming people. I'm like, oh, I wonder who's in there.
Yeah.
And I get in. I'm like, oh, Post Malone. Like, not a big rap guy, but like I know who he is. Absolutely, Post Malone. This is like when he was like in his peak. Just came out with like his top album at the time. This was 2019. And he's just sitting there like on his phone waiting with like all these fans taking pictures of him. And the manager immediately is just like, Jack, what's going on, man? Bring him to his table. And there's like all these people waiting, including Post Malone. And I remember turning like, all right, like I'm a bigger celebrity than Post Malone today. And I remember turning over and Post Malone's just like, who the fuck is that? Like, he turned to his security guy. He's like, who the hell is that guy? Like, why is he getting? I'm like, because I've put in more work over the last 5 years.
That's right.
We have Austin.
That's right. That's exactly right, man. That's exactly right. Well, it's, you know, we were, a lot of folks come to us and say, hey, I'm interested in starting a podcast. Most of the time they have no idea the time and financial commitment that it's involved to do something with. Look, the difference between a podcast that monetizes and one that doesn't, in my opinion, is the production value, straight up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? First and foremost. And we take a lot of pride in that here. But like at the end of the day, when people are, the finance part is usually the biggest bump in the road. At the end of the day, it's just like, dude, like, first of all, everybody can agree that having great micro content on social is extremely valuable. And a podcast is a very, very one-stop shop as a source to have a lot of content. And like, look, dude, if you're not doing it now, other people are. Well, those same people are going to be taking your customers not long from now because they will have earned their trust. Like, people spend 5-6 hours on this every day. Are you there? Is your stuff there? Because whoever they're seeing is who they're going to buy from, who they're going to go with, right? So the podcast thing has been, people made fun of me for building this room. A lot of people made fun of me in my industry.
'Cause it comes down to ego. People don't want to look at themselves as like, oh, hey, look at me. I think I'm bigger, better than everybody else. We're like, that's not the purpose of this.
What's the insurance guy doing with a podcast?
Exactly. Like, the purpose is to connect with people, not only just professionally, but on a personal level, to see like how we can collaborate on stuff. And, you know, if anything else, like providing value and having you as a guest, you know?
Dude, it's the best networking tool on the planet. Like, seriously, if it wasn't for podcasts, I would have never met you.
Yep. And you have to know how to do it. Like, you're a businessman. I'm learning how to be a businessman. You know, everybody we associate ourselves with.
I'd say you're doing just fine.
Everybody we associate ourselves with knows how to do it.
Absolutely.
Peter Meyerhoff, when I first met him, was actually like
I love his show.
Almost like a year ago today was the first time I ever met him. We went to a red carpet event in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It was the first time I walked in and they were like interviewing us. It was like for Vice TV because he had the Vice TV episode for what he did. And as a shot caller, if you ever want to check that out, great stuff.
His story's incredible.
It's incredible. And I walked in, I'm like, yeah, Jack O'Hara from Scottsdale, Arizona, whatever. And I walk, he's like, Scottsdale? I'm like, I'm from Scottsdale. And he like gave me like he was handing out barcodes, the link to his podcast at the time. I was like, oh, dude, that's what I do. I do a podcast. So the studio he shoots out of now is the studio I shot out of for many years. And I was able to hook that up for him. And we kind of just go back and forth, providing each other value, even with like Rack Financial and all this other stuff going on.
That's right.
Like we've built a really cool, I was at his house last week recording an episode with an MMA fighter that he's friends with as well, Joel Bauman, who's also, I think, with Rack Financial, too. It's crazy. So, like, we're all interconnected one way or another, which is, again, goes back to storytelling. If I didn't meet him, I wouldn't be in this room right now, looking back at it.
That's right. Well, our good old friends at Rack Financial are doing some amazing things. Really? They have, like, that event that at the cigar bar there, like, the amount of amazing people that were in there. In one place at one time, and it's growing like crazy. They're changing the game of merchant processing, merchant services, as far as I'm concerned, and they're giving back 5% every single. It's unreal. We're so grateful for our relationship with them and everything they do for this podcast alone. So once again, folks, we're talking with Jack O'Hara, the host of the O Show. Jack, what's next? What's your 5 to 10 year plan from now? Like
5 to 10 year.
You've accomplished more in the last 3 years than most people do in 10 to 20, bro.
I mean, it's, half of it is just putting stuff out there, and like we said, some of it sticks, some of it doesn't. I kind of have just thrown myself at the wall hoping I stick somewhere. Because I have a journalism degree. I wanted to be a play-by-play voice, still very much am in that space. But as you get older, you have to be able to financially support yourself, and that's where, like, getting into sales. I've worked multiple sales jobs, whether it be in the tech space. I did door-to-door solar sales for a little bit as well, just because, like, you want to make money. You want to be able to, because everything you want to do, this studio is not cheap, No, it wasn't. You want it to look the best.
That's right.
You want to stand out, like we said, be that black sheep. So finances became important, which is probably a big reason I started interviewing people, entrepreneurs, how they got their start, so I can take bits and pieces and mold it in my own thing. My plan the next 5-10 years, man, continuing to grow my show to the point where everybody in this country knows who we are. That's very important to me, being able, because I got into this to interview my heroes, I got into this to interview the Dave Grohls and the Jerichos and the Howard Sterns and the Michael Kays and all the people that got me into this. Because there's so many people that I even know that are doing those junket interviews with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Brad Pitt for their latest movies. I'm like, I can do that.
That's right.
Put me in the room for 5 minutes, I can ask compelling questions that I've never heard before. All you got to do is do the research. So continuing to just live my dream. Like I said, I kind of want to get into the film space. I have a few different screenplays that I've written down and have over the past few years that I actually want to put out there.
Can you say anything about them?
Yeah, I mean, just like documentaries. I have one about murder mysteries when it comes to rock stars. So, like, obviously, Kurt Cobain, I read a book. Actually, I have a connection who knows Courtney Love, who I want to try and interview, because, like, there's a myth out there that she had something to do with his death and, like, a murder as opposed to a suicide.
Wow, okay.
Same with a lot of those guys. The lead singer from The Doors, I'm blanking on his name right now.
Jim Morrison.
Jim Morrison's one of them. Elvis is obviously one of them.
Yeah.
Colonel Tom Parker. I want to go to all these. Bob Marley's one of them too.
Oh yeah.
All of these guys.
That's very fascinating. That'd be awesome.
Guy from Alice in Chains as well was another one of them. Lane Staley is his name. I want to put together like 5 to 10 murder mystery theories, interview some of their friends, some of their colleagues in those cities. I want to travel to Seattle to see where Kurt Cobain lived. I want to travel to Memphis, where Elvis was, because they do Graceland tours all the time. I want to travel to Jamaica. I want to go to all these places, because it's not only getting to do this project to interview all these cool people, it's getting those experiences with the people you're working with, getting to go to cool cities, cool places, cool countries you've never been to before. So that's part of it for me. I'm a huge horror movie guy.
Okay.
I've been writing,
What's your favorite horror movie? Or if you had to just, it's like, when it comes to baseball movies, certainly I'm like, well, I have like a 3-way tie on every category, right?
Yeah. There's this movie. So there's The Boy. I don't know if you've ever seen that. So it's about a doll. Connor's seen it. It's about a doll.
Is it good?
Basically, it's a nanny who comes in to watch this kid for these two parents who are going away on vacation, and she gets there, and the kid's a doll, just like pale as snow, just doll with black hair.
All right.
And that's kind of the trailer, so you don't really know what it's is it a possessed doll or whatever? And you find out at the end, like, there's this big twist. I love those movies that you don't really know what's happening until the very end, and you're just like, holy shit. There's a movie called The Orphan, and they actually just came out.
Oh, that one was crazy.
That one I really loved, because at the very end, it's like she's on the phone. She's like, oh no, that person's from a psychiatric home. They're 33 years old. You think it's like a 9-year-old girl. And they just came out with like a sequel to that, The Orphan, or I think it's a prequel, The Orphan Kills. Or something.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it pops up on my screen all the time. There's a movie that just came out called Smile. I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't seen it, but it was on the menu last night. I saw that's
the thing, like when it's on the menu and you don't realize it, and you look back at your TV and it's just this person with this creepy smile.
Yeah.
I'm like ghost, like walk through my body. I'm like, oh my God. Like I saw the movie already, and it was the creepiest movie ever. And I was by myself cleaning out my apartment, and my TV just turned on, and that was the first thing I saw. I was just like, I am out of here.
No, yeah.
I've never had chills like that in my entire life. But that's a really good horror movie though. But yeah, to bring out like that creative side, because you've been there where you hit rock bottom, you know?
Absolutely.
And your mind's just racing, you know? You're trying to stay positive, but there's a lot of negativity.
Yeah.
I want to be able to create that in a way. There's a lot of WWE superstars. There's this guy, his name's Bray Wyatt. Very creative guy, and he uses all of his dark thoughts and creates it into this really weird, messed up character. He has this one gimmick where he's basically like a Blues Clues type host, where he wears like a red sweater, and he's kind of like Mr. Rogers and like happy-go-lucky guy. But he has a demon that's called the Fiend. So his wrestler character, he's got this really creepy mask. He has like white dreadlocks, like red eyes, like really creepy looking guy. But it's like an alter ego of like so kind, squeaky clean to like demonic.
Yeah.
And I love that stuff. And it was one of those things where you didn't find out for a while. They had a build up for like 12 weeks of him just being like this Mr. Rogers like character. I'm like, this guy is like, he's a demonic character. So this is a weird twist. I'm like, this is going to get dark here real soon. And eventually they just introduced this really dark character. And it's like long-term storytelling. I really am fascinated with that stuff and using that dark side of your brain for good.
That's right.
As opposed to just being self-destructive. How many people are out there just like beat themselves up over things that aren't worth beating themselves
Everybody.
up? It's not worth it. You know, like if you feel that bad and you're like about to explode, hit the gym, lift heavy weights. You'll feel a lot better.
I heard a thing from that Joe Rogan said. Literally, it was just yesterday, talking about how like if you crush a really really tough hard workout every single day, like it just prepares you for what's coming in life, and you'll go out and do things you didn't think you could do, just because you've prepared your mind to operate that way.
Exactly, and once you get into that groove and change those bad habits into those habits, you become addicted to it, and that's when you really grow. That's when that straight arrow goes up. But that's something I really want to get into, just to show a different side of me. That's honestly like the thing that really gets me going, is putting shit out there, and people are like, whoa, like I didn't know you had that in you.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, now you know. I've never been one of those people that's just like, oh, stay tuned, we got this cool project coming. Like when it's ready, it'll be out and I'll shock everybody.
That's right.
That's what I love. Another one I want to do is kind of like Anchorman-esque, of just like being broadcasters, because I know a lot of broadcasters in Major League Baseball that I like even like pitched an idea of like making a cameo. And Tommy Chong's actually one where I kind of pitched an idea. I'm like, just make like a brief like cameo over FaceTime, like you'd be like someone's uncle or something. I'm like, yeah man, absolutely. I'm like, that would be really cool. Especially like my dad like grew up. He's like, I grew up watching Cheech and Chong. Like if you can like get those guys on and do stuff, like that'd be incredible.
Oh yeah.
So that's all it is for me, is being able to work with really cool people, creating really cool stories that we can even come back to someday.
That's right.
Because there's a lot of stories out there that haven't quite finished that you don't even know of. You probably met someone 2 weeks ago, and 12 years down the line, it's all going to make sense. And
that's right.
Like, holy crap. Like I can tell that story for years on end. Like the Darnell story, I was blown. I'm like, I think I wrote about him in my book when I was 10 years old. Like
that's
that,
awesome.
Check that out. And I just love stuff like that.
Well, tell me about this. So you obviously, I've never met your parents, don't know them.
Yeah.
But you obviously came from a good home because like they've supported you through this stuff, right? Did they always were they ever did they ever think that what you were doing was just fun and games and they didn't know how you would make a living doing it? Because it's so out of the ordinary for just a regular school person that goes into school, graduates, gets a job.
It's crazy. No, they were always hands-on, just like very, very supportive. Like I said, when I was 5, I'd be like, oh man, A-Rod should have done that instead of that. And then Michael K would have been like, Alex Rodriguez should have done that. And my dad's just like, yeah, that's what you're going to do.
Oh,
now,
wow.
when it came to the podcast too, like I started when I was 17. I was working odd jobs in college, working for, we had the Cactus League in Arizona for spring training. So I was able to work in the businesses that I wanted to work in that associated myself with the podcast and all that stuff. But like, I didn't necessarily have to monetize the show, and my mind was not on monetization when I first started, which probably gave me a leg up and is why I've been able to do it for so long. Because if that was my mindset early on, I probably would have hit a lot of bumps.
Yeah.
And I probably would have had a lot of self-doubt. Because again, like it wasn't until like 3 years in where Floyd Mayweather's boxing company, Mayweather Boxing and Fitness, came to me and was just like, oh yeah, well, we can put gloves, hats, shirts in the studio, and we'll pay you this amount. And I'm just like that's more money I've made in my life at this point. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, where do I sign? And then that's when it really turned. But my parents, from the beginning, like my dad watches all my broadcasts. I'll hear like the ding, ding, ding on my phone. I'm like, he's like critiquing me. I'm like, don't do that. That's the one thing. Like, I've always appreciated their support, love them to death. They're both very hardworking people. They've never done what I've done.
Right.
So it's very hard for me to like take advice from them. Like, I don't take advice from them often unless it's like personal things, stuff that they've actually experienced.
That's profound. My wife and I've invested in and helped launch a lot of businesses. And the difference in the businesses that make it versus the ones that don't is, quite frankly, it's just what they believe. And the people that have a good belief system in themselves, they have a good habitat. Like they're not going home to people that doubt whatever it is they're doing. That's such a big deal. But like, when we will have that, the young entrepreneur that's got the idea, they got the vision, they got everything, but they're like, my parents are questioning it. I'm like, well, I don't know your parents. Have they ever owned a business before? No.
Exactly.
Have they ever ran? So, well, that's not a good source. Like they care, but their job is to protect you. And if you can't answer all their questions right now, they're going to immediately throw up the safety net and say, hey man, like, maybe you should do something safer. That's what a parent will do a lot of times.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Like I worked a tech sales job and left when I was making, like, I'm like, not that I'm raking in the cash now with the podcast, but like at the time I had like one sponsor and I'm like, I'm going to leave this tech job just because like I have no passion for this at all. And It was really driving down just like everything that I was slowing down productivity on the podcast side too.
Yeah.
I was just like, are you sure? Like it's a safety net for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I want to feel alive again. Like,
dude, it's your life.
If I don't put my back against the wall and really fight for this, it's not going to grow. And within 2 weeks of leaving that, I had like 3 or 4 different companies that I was partnering with. I'm like, oh man, I should have quit months ago. But like even in sales, like I didn't know much. My dad's been the director of sales for a pharmaceutical company for about 25 years now. Like, I'll ask him about sales because he knows about that.
That's right.
But when it comes to this stuff, early on, my dad would be like, you should do this, talk about this, set it up this way. I'm like, you've never done this. He's the same way with my brother. My brother's just trying to like, not sign with labels, but like learning the business side of music because it could really screw you if you don't know what you're doing.
That's correct.
And my dad, he tries to be like the Joe Jackson to Michael Jackson.
Okay.
Just like we need to practice. We need to go down, get your reps in. He's like, Dad, like, what are you doing? Stop.
That's right.
But
that's right.
That's all because he loves us, and you
100%.
have to recognize that too.
Absolutely.
So, but you also got to know, like, I'm gonna ask people who have done this before. That's how you grow, man.
100%.
I'll ask you questions. I'll ask Brad Lee questions when I see him. I'll ask Peter questions about growing stuff. Like, because they're where I want to be.
That's right.
Like that's where the success is going to come from, not from surrounding yourself with people who are just there. Even the people that are supportive, like I've been friends with a lot of people who are just like, oh, what he's doing is so cool, but they don't necessarily know the space. So like hanging around them all the time isn't necessarily good for you either.
Oh man.
Which is the hardest truth ever for people to find because they are great people,
Absolutely.
I've had friends along this journey that have been awesome, like forever. I have their back, they have my back, but we can't hang out all the time because we're going in different
That's it.
Or else we're just going to drown each other.
That's it, man. Dude, that's so that's so true. What you're talking about, and I've been actually like roasted for saying like there's people that I from my childhood that I know and love, but I don't hang out with them because they're not a part of my future and my career. Like they're going this way and I'm going that way, so like we can't be together all the time. It's literally physically impossible. He's doing what he wants to do and I'm doing what I want to do for career wise, so and if you want to do something like in a space like this, you can't hang out with people that aren't in a space like this.
That's right. And it's a hard pill to swallow because you realize you're like, are we just like distancing ourselves from each other? It's like, no, like we legitimately have different goals that require 100% of our attention. Like you think in your head you could balance all of that. You really can't. Like you need to be able to balance the things that you really prioritize, and friendships, if they don't align with what you're doing, unfortunately fizzle out at the end of the day. It just happens. It doesn't mean you don't care about them. It just means that, you have different walks of life.
So, where you're staying downtown?
I am, like right next to Broadway. It is crazy. It is a funky time. It's crazy. We hit up Jason Aldean's spot, Kid Rock's Steakhouse, a few different barbecue spots, Tootsie's, that's down there.
Yeah.
I want to check out Nissan Stadium too because everything's right there. It's really cool.
It's all right
Predators
there.
are right there as well. It's a neat time, first time ever for me. So I've been to a lot of cool cities. This is probably one of the cooler ones. You got to come with the right group of people.
That's right.
But it's fun.
Well, there's still out of all the restaurants, bars, or nightclubs that we had, there's still one left standing, and it's on the corner of 2nd Avenue and Broadway. It's called Bootlegger's Inn. So if you walk down there, and they have amazing, an unreal selection of moonshine, flavored moonshine.
Really, that's kind of old school.
Well, that was the whole thing, and it's a smaller place. There's actually a second floor. I don't know. Like not that long ago, we went up on the second floor and it hadn't changed from when it was a 80s retro bar nightclub from before that. I think they redid it, I heard, but I'm not sure. But like
it's like right next to it was like Acme.
Yeah.
That's like right there as soon as you turn in.
And Acme, from the whole time we were down, that was just an abandoned building that nothing was in for the longest time. So like, I mean, the since about 2000, maybe like 10 to 2012, like that place is just like it's not, you wouldn't recognize it if you left then and came back now. The convention center wasn't done. The only thing that you would like Tootsie's was like all the rooftop bars. There were none of those, like none, like zero.
It's more of an entertainment place as opposed to just like mom and pop's bar.
It's exactly right, and that was when we figured out that for me, it was Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville was the first like big corporate place to come in. And then all of a sudden, and there was only a handful of folks that owned all that real estate down there. And I don't know, I couldn't figure out exactly how or why, but I felt like I was going to eventually be in a mom and pop, get pushed out type thing. So that wasn't why we got out when we got out. We got out because I needed a lifestyle change. But
I mean, is it crazy? So that's another thing. Like talk about 5, 10. I'd probably say this is my 30-year plan. Like my goal when I was 16 years old was to have like my own sports bar and have it be like a family-run business with like kids and stuff. And like that's something I could pass on to them. Is that an industry worth getting into today?
So,
your honest opinion.
I would 100% invest and own and support restaurants and the hospitality industry. I would never operate another one. And the people that do it, I've had some amazing pit masters and like Kerry Bringle, who owns the Peg Leg Porker and a whole bunch of other stuff. That guy, like, you're either a really good business person or you're not, and that industry will expose one or the other. You know what I'm saying? So it's the first time we thought we were really good at nightclubs and bars, and so the first place that we bought was a restaurant. Well, I figured out real quick I knew nothing about food, and I figured out that like there's a shelf life, and like we lost so much money in the beginning because we didn't know how long to keep stuff in the refrigerator, and health department comes in and is like, this is terrible. Like, you know what I mean? Like we didn't know that like there's these certain strips that you had to have in your dishwasher to make sure it was the right temperature. Dude, we didn't know anything. So it's a very like, there's a lot of businesses where maybe you can get away with not micromanaging the hell out of it. Not in that. It's not even like about surrounding yourself with all of the right people that you know are like right for the job and people that you trust. Well, every good that's sold at the end of the day, it's money that you've bought. We used to say the bottle of Jack Daniels that sat behind the bar. I knew that 18% of that was going to be stolen, spilled, or given away. right? So I'm only making money on the 82%. And if it was more than 82%, if it was like, if it was 23% that was stolen or given away, I knew we had a problem and we had to deal with somebody. If it was less, that was good. But 18 was like the number that you aimed for, and you built your par. Every week you'd go through and they'd run inventory and be like, we need this much of this because we sold it this much. When you get to your par, that was, if it was at 18% on all that stuff, it was good. And that was kind of our rule of thumb right there. But I mean, somebody's got, like, we used to have to like hire people to come in and purposely try to get people to do illegal stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like, spot them. Like, hey, man, we think this person's stealing. We were marking cups, marking bottles, anything you could think of. Because, I mean, bartenders, and I shouldn't say bartenders, but like just people, if they're desperate enough, they'll do anything. And they have a lot of access to, I mean, people have done this weirdest stuff. They'll take a bottle of the worst vodka you can think and they'll pour it in a empty bottle of Grey Goose and then sell it as Grey Goose. It's crazy, dude.
That's low life stuff, too. Talking about like people that just like,
oh man,
own their money. I mean, that's kind of smart. I mean, talk about just like stress end on end.
It is, and especially if it's a nightclub and there's alcohol involved. We had our security staff was always top notch and amazing, but there was always a lawsuit. We were always in a lawsuit because somebody got escorted out and they felt like it was too rough or whatever, you know what I mean? So, and maybe sometimes it was.
Yeah.
But and I haven't even thought about this stuff in so long, but like all these memories just came flashing back when you asked that question. But I would never operate another one.
You talk about the lifestyle. Like, what do you mean? Like just being around that all the time, or did you kind of like flood into it?
I wasn't. I had a lot of maturing that needed to happen. Still today, but back then especially, and when you're finding yourself, and like the majority of our, like 80% of our revenue was done after 9 p.m. You know what I'm saying? So like, how much good happens between 9 p.m. and 3 in the morning?
Not much.
And so at some point in time, I had a young son at home that I felt like I was a zombie when it was, because he'd wake up early and I've been asleep for 3 hours, or he's with grandparents and I'm not seeing as much as I should. I had an amazing woman that I just didn't treat that good because like, you're just not, I don't know, man. Like, people, it's a totally different atmosphere than like if you go to church or whatever else and you start to better yourself. And I wasn't able at that time to be to continue to mature into the person that I felt called to be in that habitat. I felt like that habitat was bad for me.
And as a Christian man too.
It's not necessarily that like it's bad for everybody. A lot of people do it great. I I could probably handle it today. Or I can handle anything if I choose to, right? But back then I wasn't, I had a lot of learning still to do.
Yeah. And when you're like trying to juggle all these things, like just being a father of itself, I can only imagine, especially with like a young child trying to balance a bar, working those hours, those insane hours, trying to build all of this stuff. Like it's really hard building the stuff that you love to build.
Oh yeah.
Like try building a ton of stuff that causes you stress, anxiety, depression. That's when you burn out and you don't even recognize yourself. That's where I was at with some of these sales positions. I was just like this is important. Yeah. And I feel like I already have the experience doing this podcast to sales, convincing people to come on, have conversations, sell them on the fact that you're legit. That way, you get referrals and you get more guests to come on,
That's right.
But it's so difficult. Like in your mind, you're like, I could balance all of this. It's if you don't love it, you're going to burn out quick and you're not going to be the same person. It's hard to get out of that rut for some people. It
was hard to build good habits and discipline when you're in that stuff, and I was too nice. No, it was cool because like as the owner, my kid when Ethan was younger, like he went with me to work every day. So like I'm up there, I'm doing inventory or whatever, and there's a stage up there with microphones, and he could go up there and talk into the mic and hear himself, and there was a lot of good that came from it. But I was also too nice. I learned later that a true friend wouldn't ask you for a discount. A true friend would be like, dude, I want to pay full price, maybe even more because I am your friend. And back then, everybody was my friend because I had the keys to the bar. You know what I'm saying? So like, and you want everybody to like you and all these things. So like it was, I probably let some people take advantage of me and gave away too much. Yeah, I kind of run it because our top sponsor is TickPick, which is that ticket marketplace app. Yeah, get free tickets. Dude, you've got hooked up like crazy with that company. Yeah, we got behind home plate seats for it was Yankees Astros ALCS. That was unbelievable. Like the worst game you could ever go to, but like the best seats ever. You get full access to the Legends Suite, which has like a full buffet of steak, bison, all of these really, really good foods.
but like people will ask me like, hey, like what's going on, man? See what you're doing. I'm looking to go to this event. I hear it. I'm like, come on.
That's right.
And like my closest friends will ask, and it's like, absolutely, because I'll go with you, and it's a fun opportunity for all of us. But when you don't, like the kid from high school that you barely knew reaches out, it's just like, hey man, like, well, I don't know why we ever lost touch. It's like we were never in touch, man.
Yeah,
like,
people are doing it with this room a lot. They'll want to come in and just borrow it for a minute, or whatever. So it happens all the time.
It's so easy to see through too.
Absolutely. But the people that do love us, they offer to go above and beyond, to do those things, just like we would too as well. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, I mean, it really opens your eyes. I feel like
absolutely
we experience those things because we've been called to grow.
Absolutely.
Where like some other people just like you have the talents, you have the opportunity to grow. You just don't want to get out of that comfort zone.
That's it.
It's weird.
Well, man, I could hang out with you and talk all day long. Is there anything else that you would want to get into here with me today?
Ooh, I think the restaurant thing was the big thing for me, but obviously moving forward, we'll get into it later. Obviously, a lot of big things happening with Rack Financial. Talking about like just moral wise too. I know you touched on that too. Like
we're gonna get you set up as an affiliate, baby, with Rack Financial. Absolutely, because you can help a lot of people that need them through your platform. It's like all of my businesses are using Rack for their processing. I put it to you this way: not knowing what I didn't know about the world of merchant processing before I got into it. I was just like everybody else. We need to take credit cards, so you just call the bank. Nothing against the banks, but like the banks, they saved us a ton of money, and we're giving back in the process, which is fantastic.
It's a win-win for everybody. So
100%, and it literally took just a few minutes to even make it all rock and roll. And like if they couldn't save, then we wouldn't have did anything. You know what I'm saying? They gave me an analysis side by side. We were comparing apples to apples, and it was a great experience. So we're super excited to be working with them and what the future is going to bring with that.
Yeah, I mean, you said it best. We went out. Where did we go? Toca Madera. That one time, and you were telling me it's like. Having a lot of money amplifies the type of person you are.
That's it.
It's either going to amplify how good of a person you are. It's going to amplify how big of an asshole you are.
That's right.
I've seen it both ways. You've seen it both ways.
That's right.
Working with a ton of people with, a lot of cap space, but everybody's doing it for good, for the right reasons.
That's right.
I feel like in my short experience, hard to find, but when you find it, it's just like
absolutely.
It grows and grows and grows.
And you find that everybody, people, we used to, people of the same kind correlate together, you know what I'm saying? So like that's the cool thing is once you find some good, there's a lot of it out there, and those they lead you to those other people.
Oh my God, absolutely. And I'm so excited, so grateful. Again, like Peter Meyerhoff, without him, I don't think we wouldn't be in this room right now. I wouldn't be able to talk to a lot of these people. And again, through podcasting, to bring that full circle, whoever you bring in here, build a relationship with them, because eventually down the line, that story is going to come full circle, and there's going to be a reason why you guys connected.
So I'm big on comparing people. People remind me of people I see on the screens a lot. So we talked about you and Daniel Radcliffe, right?
Yeah.
Peter is a guy there's that show called Reacher, that he's a big dude.
Right.
And to me, Peter and what's his name, Connor? Alan Richardson, I think is his name. Looks just like Peter. I even told Peter, and now that Peter is getting in real big shape too, and everything else. Like it's crazy how much they look alike to me.
It's funny because when he first went in the Slammer, skinny kid, comes out very jacked, but also big, and now he's finally like he's toning out. He's getting the 6-pack. He's leaning out, but still is maintaining all the big muscle mass. So he's arguably in the best shape of his life, I'd say.
I'd say no doubt.
That's the shape I aspire to be in one day. I tell him that all the time. He's like, you don't want this.
Well, if you keep doing it the way you're doing it, it's a no-brainer. It's going to happen.
I gotta fight this metabolism, man.
That's right.
That's the one thing keeping me like, I'm 23. Look at me. I'm 170 pounds.
So you're going to be in the Hit Lab over the weekend, interviewing some folks, right?
Absolutely.
Who you got?
We got Tyler Jack Harris.
Oh, that
tomorrow.
He's a stud, man.
I loved that episode that you guys had, and we're also going to have a reporter from the Tennessee Titans tomorrow as well.
Excellent.
Which is going to be fun.
Excellent. The Blaine Bishop came in. He was a great guest on ours, and he has a show. He's a 4-time Pro Bowler for the Titans. Should be in the Hall. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. He was fantastic. But when the Titans were in their heyday in the late '90s and early 2000s, Yeah, dude, that sounds like you got a lot of good stuff happening, man.
Did you ever talk to Brendan about having Jack White in here? Because he's got his place out here too.
Oh yeah, dude, Brendan's so cool. He just released a new record too.
Yep,
by the way,
I saw it.
He'll be back, and we're going to do some stuff. So his son and my son, we've been baseball teammates for quite some time. That's how I was introduced to him, right? So, and what a great family. And his kid Declan is awesome. And I have videos of Ethan and Declan playing music in Brendan's studio at home, which is kind of neat.
Crazy.
You never know. You never know who's going to come in here, man.
So that's the best thing about getting into this industry. Like I said, literally you never know who's going to walk in. You never know what conversation is going to inspire you, and you just don't know what different types of businesses you're going to be involved with.
That's right. Well, once again, folks, we had the man, Jack O'Hara, the host of the O Show and play-by-play sports commentator for ESPN. Dude, thanks so much for hanging with me again today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, man. I was looking forward to this for a long time. This place is top of the line.
Well, I appreciate it. Wait till you see what we're building next. Absolutely. Well, folks, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of The Hit Streak. I'm your man, Nick Hyder. God bless.